108 times. That's how often adults in the US pick up their phone each day. And globally, we spend nearly 5 hours on our smartphones daily, with over 2 hours of that on social media alone. A staggering 37% of people show signs of problematic smartphone use, which can lead to all sorts of physical and mental health problems. Now, you probably heard of such numbers 1,000 times, and there are few people who don't agree that we collectively have a smartphone addiction problem. And indeed, smartphones have gotten a bit of a reputation problem lately. No longer are they celebrated as the technological marvels they really are, but are rather seen as a growing nuisance. But this is quite unfair in my opinion. You see, I usually make videos about smartphone photography and how great these little cameras have become, oftentimes rivaling big and professional systems. It is truly astounding. As is the fact that modern smartphones, in addition to consumer cameras, have essentially replaced MP3 players, navigation systems, pocket mirrors, portable gaming devices, voice recorders, video cameras, alarm clocks, calculators, scanners, wallets to some degree, and for more and more people, books and the personal computer itself. I mean, we have the entire human knowledge in our pockets, right? Yet we spend hours at a time looking at AI-generated cat videos. So it's clearly not the phones, but what we do with them, how we use them. That's also why I don't like advice along the lines of, getting a dumb phone or locking your device into a box for X amount of hours. Because by all means, we should harness the power of smartphones as tools and not as distracting addiction, of course. But in order to do that, we have to redesign our devices. And that's of course where Minimalist Phone comes into play, who are also the sponsor of this video. An award-winning app with millions of downloads that transforms your phone into a minimalist, clutter-free space and helps you break your bad habits without getting rid of your smartphone altogether. Minimalist Phone is available for both Android and iOS, but the iOS version is not as feature-rich yet, so today I focus on Android. Now, this app works as a launcher that essentially replaces your home screen with this minimal and simple text-based interface. Here you have time and date, the circle shows you your battery level. Down here you can have favorite apps, and with a swipe to the left, you see all your installed apps. And that's it. No flashy icons, just plain text. Because you see, by default our phone acts very much like a big billboard with notifications all over the place, colorful app icons fighting for your attention, and we humans of course are drawn to colors and lights, and so it happens that we open an app we actually maybe didn't want to open in the first place. So this clean and text-based design alone already helps to reduce mindless screen time. Of course, we can customize the design to our taste, like changing the font or the color scheme. For example, I personally prefer to use this warm brown tone, as it is easier on the eyes compared to high contrast with white text on black background. But what I love here is that we have some options, but it is never overwhelming. Even the customization sticks with this clutter-free vibe, this sense of serenity. Speaking of that, what could destroy this calm oasis? Right, a ton of notifications. So how does Minimalist Phone handle those? Well, again, in a pretty simple fashion. There's a notification filter where you can choose which apps should be allowed to notify you, and these notifications you then see on your lock screen, for example, as you normally would. But you can also pick the ones you don't want to notify you, and these notifications are then filtered out and land here. So from time to time, if you want, you can have a look to see if you missed anything, and if not, you can just delete everything with one click. Now, ideally you'd have your filter set up in a way that nothing potentially important is filtered out, because I can say from my own experience that the constant thought in the back of our heads that you might miss something important can lead to an actual increase in random phone pickups, which is essentially the opposite of what we want to achieve here. And if you're interested, I linked a study below that highlights the relationship between switching off notifications, and an increase in FOMO or fear of missing out. So be thoughtful about how you set up this filter. Alright, so now we have talked about how Minimalist Phone offers a distraction-free design, which on its own is already quite efficient, especially in the first few days when everything is new and every time you see your new interface you are reminded about your intent, like being more thoughtful about smartphone usage and cutting back on social media or whatnot. And that in itself makes it more likely that you don't open TikTok or Instagram. But as I have experienced myself, after a few weeks of usage, this novelty wears off, and especially with people like me whose addictive behaviors are already deeply ingrained automations like, checking Facebook or Instagram first thing in the morning, well, we find our ways sadly. And after a few days, our thumb just, leads us there, and the text-based minimal design is maybe not enough anymore. So to counter that, Minimalist Phone has a bunch of tools up its sleeve, and I will now go through them from lightest to most powerful. The first thing is you can easily rename apps. So Instagram can become no-go zone, for example, which might remind you about your intent to not open it before you actually do it. Or you could also be more creative here and, for example, come up with a long number sequence for each app and therefore create some sort of riddle, and you have to at least remember some numbers before opening your app of choice. But in my experience, for me at least, this is not really enough, and again, after a few days your dopamine-seeking brain knows all the tricks. Now, the next countermeasure is already quite a different caliber, and that is mindful launch delay as well as in-app time reminders. The way it works is that for every app you can first set up this mindful launch delay, which essentially delays the opening of the app by 15 seconds, and during that period it asks you whether you're really sure that you want to open that specific app. Now, 15 seconds might not sound that long, but when you're randomly trying to open an app, it is very long and very annoying, and it definitely breaks the automatic behavior. You're forced to stop and think about what you're doing right now. And I can say from my own experience that this is highly effective, and more often than not, I click close again and feel caught in a way, but also empowered because I resisted the urge, right? Now, in conjunction with this mindful launch delay, there's also the in-app time reminder. So before you are allowed to enter a restricted app, if you want, you have to dial in the amount of time you plan on spending there. So for example, 1 minute or 3 minutes or an hour. And when that time eventually runs out, it reminds you inside whatever app you are. And you can set up yourself how that reminder looks like. It can be a mindful break of 15 seconds again, where you can decide to either leave the app or extend your time span. Or it can just plain and simple force you out if that's what you need, right? Now, for more of a softer approach, it can also just politely remind you. But yeah, you might have guessed it already, the more forceful approaches are the more effective ones here again. Speaking of forceful, one of the coolest features of the Minimalist Phone app is certainly the ability to block certain apps. You can either block an app directly for anywhere between 4 hours and 30 days. And yes, this app is blocked then and you cannot unblock it. You'd have to contact support to do that, or, completely delete the whole launcher. So yeah, pretty effective measure in my opinion. Or you can also set up blocking schedules where you can block apps of your choosing for a set period of time every day. For example, for a mindful morning or a screen-free evening. Of course, you can customize the exact times, all the apps you want to block, and so on. That's a really great feature. I myself, for example, have the bad habit of waking up and instead of getting out of bed immediately, I'm on my phone and, scroll through social media. So blocking these apps in the morning is very targeted and effective for me. Alright, now before I forget, there's also a monochrome mode, which allows you to get rid of the colors within a certain app. And there's research that shows the benefits of this, especially when we talk about social media apps. The link is in the description below again. But I myself, I have a bit mixed feelings here, as I think it goes a bit into the dumb phone direction we talked about in the beginning. Like, it's artificially crippling your phone experience, and I much rather try to prevent myself from opening TikTok or Instagram too often in the first place, or create blocking schedules we talked about, than to make the experience itself miserable. But that's just my opinion, and for another person it might be super helpful, so take this with a grain of salt. But I see it as drinking a glass of wine or eating chocolate. Of course, in general that's bad for you, but from time to time, in small doses, it might actually add a little bit of happiness. And when you do enjoy that glass of wine or bar of chocolate, you want it to taste properly and not be diluted with water or whatever. You know what I mean. And yeah, for me that would be a colorful screen when watching TikTok videos. Speaking of wine and chocolate, I think that is one of the big challenges with our smartphones. Unlike smoking or any kind of drug abuse, it's not as straightforward as, hey, this is bad for you. You have to quit. Not saying that getting sober or quit smoking is easy in any way, shape or form here, but the general concept is easier. Whereas for smartphones, as I said in the beginning of this video, these are valuable tools that help us every day, and we need to use them. And that's the hard part, because we have to navigate this contradiction that they are good and bad at the same time, depending on how we use them. And that's exactly where I think that the Minimalist Phone app does an incredible job, highlighting what's useful and hiding and preventing what's potentially more harmful. And of course, Minimalist Phone alone won't miraculously solve all of our social media addiction problems on its own. There are many other factors that might contribute. But it is one very helpful tool to support us on that journey. Now, if you want to try out the app, it offers a 7-day free trial, and after that, depending on your region, it costs a few bucks a month. Here in Austria, I think it's €5 a month. And I think that is absolutely worth it, because remember how much time we spend mindlessly scrolling through social media. And even if the app helps us reduce this by, let's say, 25%, that amounts to something between 30 and 50 hours of newly won free time per month, or 500 hours per year. Imagine what you could do with that. And if you don't trust me, linked in the description below, there's also some academic research done specifically on the Minimalist Phone app. Alright guys, thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next one. Cheers.